Morning to everyone. I think we are ready to get started with today's session. Once again, good morning to everyone. My name is Anthony Brockington. I am the Small and Minority Business Program Manager here at the Commission for Minority Affairs on behalf of our Executive Director and our Board of Commissioners, Dr. DaCosta. I would like to welcome you to today's session, which is Contracting 101. We have with us today Mr. Michael Corp. He is the Deputy District Director for the U.S. Small Business Administration South Carolina District, and he will be doing today's session. I just want to remind everyone that today's session is being recorded and will be made available to you at the conclusion of this presentation. We will also provide you with a short survey so that we can get your feedback and better prepare for any upcoming sessions that you would like. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Michael Corp.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Mike Corp here with the South Carolina SBA in Columbia. Just a little bit about us. Some of you may have been on the presentation we did the other day. Angela Brewer was on also. And we talked about kind of an overview of what the SBA does. You know, we do lending, business startup, and contracting. So today we're going to focus a little bit more on contracting. Just a little background of me: I'm retired military, so thank you all for your service. If you're veterans, before I came up to the SBA, I worked at Shaw Air Force Base as a contracting officer. So I was on the other end awarding government contracts, federal contracts, that is. And came up to the SBA in 2010. Toward the end of 2010, I've been with the SBA ever since. Our office here in Columbia, we have 8 people. A couple of us are former contracting officers, so that's a good first stop for questions. And we also have lender relations specialist and what we call marketing specialist also. So we have a little good variety in our office. And we also have alternate work sites in Charleston, South Carolina, which is the One Deep office, and also Spartanburg, South Carolina. And of course, I'll mention all our resource partners in between. Good to have these relationships with CMA and others. We have our small business development centers, SCORE offices, and women's business centers also scattered throughout the state. So anyway, without further ado, I will see if I can pull up the slides here. I'll take my face off of here so I don't tie up any bandwidth. Let's see. All right. Try this first. Okay, can you see the slides coming up?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'll go to, and what I'll do, and by the way, you will get a copy of these slides, and we'll also send you an email with several links. What I'll try to do is I'll go through the slides first, and time permitting, we'll go on a few websites after I go through the slides. So you will get a copy of these, and another within an email, you get some links also. But I'll try to pause after each section and I'll stop to answer questions, go from there. Okay, so hopefully you can see the full screen I just went to. So today, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about government contracting suitability, and this is federal contracting. We do have relationships with all the other offices throughout the state, like DOT, governor, the state, local, city, county. So there's not just federal, what we're talking about today, but there's other opportunities there. So you want to explore all of them. We'll talk a little bit about how the government buys goods and services. We'll get into the federal contracting programs, which I'm sure most of you are interested in. These are what we call our preferential contracting programs. And then we'll wrap it up with some marketing and selling to the government information. So let's talk first about suitability. First question that's always asked is, are you a small business? And I would bet, I'd almost say 100% of you are small businesses. A lot of times we get interesting questions. People think that you know, they had a couple $100,000 worth of sales and they're not a small business, but it's actually the opposite. You're more likely, unless you're a really large company, you're in most cases going to be considered a small business, and that's going to be determined based on your NAICS codes. We'll talk about that in a little bit. North American Industry Classification Standard. That's probably one of the most important things, because everything in federal contracting revolves around that codes. And there's size restrictions. What determines that you're a small business will be your average number of employees, or your annual receipts, actually an average, a 3-year average. Different types of businesses, business types, you know, whether you're sole proprietorship, corporation, LLC, you know, hopefully you have a business established already. And you could actually be you know, we want businesses in the US, of course, home office in the US. And in all our programs, somebody asked us the other day, are for profit businesses, not for nonprofits. So there's one of the first questions is, do you know your NAICS codes? And again, that's most important. And there is, you'll have these slides, and there's actually a website, and we'll try to go on there. A lot of times, if you don't know your codes, just say you do construction. It's a six-digit code, 236220. I'm sorry, and actually to be considered that's a good example too, because to be considered as a small business under that code, which is very common in federal contracting, all bases and government agencies do construction. If your average revenues are below $40 million, you would be considered small. So that's just another reminder. You know, it doesn't take much to be considered a small business. Is your business ready? This is also very important. You know, one of the things we say is government contracting may not be for everybody. You know, what kind of work do you do? Do you do construction, janitorial, landscaping, IT, facilities maintenance? There's a wide variety. I mean, the federal government buys just about everything, depending on what you do, how much opportunities are there too. Do you have experience? And experience could be not just in federal contracting, it could be state, local, commercial. What do you bring to the table? What kind of experience and background do you have? And are you going to be able to have the cash inventory, working capital? And most importantly, when you get a contract, and that you can fulfill the requirements of the contract. And then, do you know how to find contracting opportunities? We'll talk about that a little bit too. How the government buys goods and services. So the federal government's the world's largest buyers. We spend $500 billion a year. And of that $500 billion, there's a nice pie chart we'll show you in a couple slides, but we want 23% of those, or you could say 125 billion, to go to small businesses. That's basically a requirement. It's a goal that we have every year to meet all the federal agencies. And I will tell you, most of them do way more than 23%. I can count on having awarded federal contracts, I can count on probably one hand the amount of times that I had to go directly to a large business. And usually those are reserved for the really large, complex, we buy jets, aircraft, other aircraft, ships, tanks, nuclear, things like that are going to go to a large business. There's a couple methods to get to a federal contract, to get award. Full and open competition, of course, would be everybody. They can do, and when I say they, the contracting officer, they can do a small business set aside. So if you're a small business, it's reserved for you. For small businesses only, the large businesses are eliminated. And there's also a sole source possibility. I think the next slide talks about that a little bit. So we got full and open, anybody can apply. Set asides, when you get into the sole source area, you have the rule of two. So realistically, it's difficult, if not impossible, with one exception of one of the programs I'll talk about later, to do a sole source contract, where it would only, we could award the contract directly to you. We'll talk about that a little bit more under the 8A program. So here's some of the assistance available out there. And we talked about this a little bit the other day too. And again, if somebody just got on, you will have these slides available to you. So you will have all these links, and actually the email I'll send, you'll have even some other links to go with it. So here are some of the resources. We have business opportunity specialists. Again, they're in our office. We have 3 business opportunity specialists. They'll be on the last slide: Carl Faison, Angela Brewer, and Stephanie Workman. And they work primarily in government contracting. We also have a procurement center rep, normally out of the Georgia area, which, to be quite honest, you probably would never go directly to them. We usually get assistance from them as needed. Procurement technical assistance centers, we have one new one in Columbia that's officially a PTAC, but we have 3 SBA offices, SBDCs, I should say, in Columbia, Greenville, and Charleston that have government contracting assistance available. So they have a person assigned to each one of them that assists with government contracting. Sherry Pittenger in Greenville, Scott Bellows is one in Columbia, and I forget the new person's name. They just hired a new person in Charleston. So there's other assistants out there. Quite honestly, most of the time, if it's contracting, since we have a good amount of experience in the office, myself included, we have like 3 or 4 people that are really good with federal contracting. So that can be your first stop. Some of the market resources available, I'm not going to read them all to you. We're going to talk about SAM a little bit, System for Award Management. And there's a lot of areas that you can do research in. Like if you're looking for contracting opportunities, your first stop is going to be Beta SAM. We'll talk about that a little bit today, but mainly today I want to get you familiar with how to position yourself to get to that position area where you're ready for federal contracts. Okay, on the first part I just talked about, are there any questions? Let me see if there's anything here in chat. Not yet. Okay. And a lot of things that you may be thinking about, we're probably going to cover them. So I'll just keep going. If there are any questions, just let me know. So your first step when you look at federal contracting, besides looking at, here's what I do, are there any opportunities out there for us? Depends on what you do. I never say never, because you may do something, a little bit different, and that's where some of these resources come into play. You can actually go out there on SAM and see what kind of contract's been awarded in your area. You may have a NAICS code. First you find the NAICS code. You could even put keywords in there and see what kind of opportunities are out there for you. Once you are ready to go and you say, my first step is I want to be registered in SAM, System for Award Management. That's the first requirement. That's, you have to do this to be eligible for federal contracts. And some of you probably have already registered in SAM, and it's not that difficult. Quite honestly, you can do it in a couple hours. Even during the last class, we always have somebody that brings it up. You want to start off at sam.gov, www.sam.gov. If you put sam.com in there, if you put SAM in a Google search, you are going to come up most likely with one of these companies that You know, they'll say they'll assist you in registering in SAM and even try to say guarantee you contracts and things like that. And the going rate is about $500, and you're still going to have to provide them the information needed anyways. So, you know, if you want to pay somebody $250 an hour for something you can do yourself and something you need to be familiar with, you know, that's up to you, but I don't recommend it. I would just say be careful. As soon as if you ended up on one of those sites, the red flag should go up when they start asking you for credit card information, because you're already paying us with your tax dollars. That's what we're here for. We help you free of charge. So there's a few steps in here, and we're going to go on the SAM site, but you're going to have to obtain a DUNS number, Dun and Bradstreet number. There's actually a phone number. There's a website. You can see the links down here. You'll have, so you get a DUNS number. And one thing when you register for that DUNS, they may ask you if you want to participate in credit monitoring and where they could charge you, but you can say, you probably want to say no, and it's free of charge. So you can even call that number and get a DUNS number, or just go online and fill out an application. Takes a couple minutes, to be honest. Register in SAM. When you do register in SAM, that's step number 3. I don't really like that's on these slides, so that's separate, because one of the questions, somebody asked this the other day, when you start going through that SAM process, if I printed you out a SAM registration and it was like 18 pages long, it would look, and handed it to you and said, here's how you register, that it would look a little overwhelming, but it's really not difficult. They just are going to ask you a series of questions. They're going to ask you, are you a small business? Are you veteran-owned, women-owned, minority, things like that? And you're going to go through, and when you get in, and we'll send you a tip sheet, a registration tip sheet on the email too. And when you get to, you'll get to one block that says, do you have a cage code? And most people, heck, I can barely remember the acronym sometimes, a commercial entity, government entity code, cage code. If you simply just answer no, one will be assigned to you automatically. If you start clicking on it and trying to go through that whole process, that'll tie you up more. So remember that, just say no. And I'll mention this again, but if you get hung up somewhere on the SAM registration, we're used to helping people through that. It should take you a couple hours if you get all your information together. Are there any questions on SAM registration? I'll try to jump on the site for a minute, but it's going to tell you the same thing. There's kind of a step-by-step pecking order. And even if somebody has had experience, has recently registered, what will happen is you'll submit the SAM registration, and you'll get an email back. We received your registration, and what happens next? And then they validate. And I should have mentioned this before. When you do your DUNS number, when you get that, when you register for that DUNS number, just say if it was Smith Construction Company, comma LLC. When you register in SAM, you want to make sure that matches up exactly to the way you did your DUNS number, because SAM is kind of flaky. And if you abbreviated something in your SAM registration, what it does, once it says we have your application, it's going to validate everything that's in there. And one of the validations is they'll validate your DUNS number. You know, that you have a good DUNS number, and then they match that up with the SAM registration you just submitted. So that's a common thing that comes up. It'll tie you up for a day to fix it if there's some discrepancy between your DUNS and your SAM. And again, we have a handout we'll give you it points out some of the common discrepancies that happen during the SAM registration process, things to be careful of. So that's one thing I want to point out. Are there any questions on SAM? Let me see if I can go on the chat real quick. No, none yet. But again, that once you do that, you'll get that initial email. congratulations, or it'll say we received your application. Within 10 days, you will get another email that says, congratulations, you are now registered in SAM. You are now eligible for federal contracts as a small business. So right at that point, you're going to be eligible to compete for any what we call small business set-asides for federal contracts. And that will be a big portion of everything you'll see out there. I would say probably like 75% of all contract opportunities out there are small business set-asides from the contracting officer, which is what I used to do, post them out there for the particular requirement. So now within that area of small business, we have our preferential contracting programs. And this is the most, this is the most detailed part of the class we're going into today. So there's the different programs, and I'm sure most of you have heard at least of 2 or 3 of these. So there's the woman-owned small business program. Remember I mentioned that 23%. This is that pie chart represents the $500 billion the federal government spends each year. And within that area, the slices of the pie there, as I like to call them, everyone wants a piece of the pie, right? They want opportunities. So you have the color-coded slices there. These are the preferential contracting programs, and we're going to talk about each one of these in more detail. The woman-owned small business program, which has a corresponding goal of 5% of that 23% or that $125 billion the federal government spends. We want to go to woman-owned small businesses. 5% to go to small disadvantaged businesses, which we commonly call the 8A program. So within these, we talked about the small business set aside. The contracting officer can do a woman-owned small business set aside, a small disadvantaged business set aside, where if you're certified in these programs, you further eliminate the other competition. So if they did a woman-owned small business set aside, you must be a woman-owned small business certified company to compete for that contract. So it's really good if you have those certifications. Small disadvantaged business, same thing, 5%. Hub zone, historically underutilized businesses. These are located in economically depressed, high unemployment areas. We'll talk about that some more. 3% goal, and service disabled veteran-owned small business, another 3%. And the VA has their own program. We'll mention that a little bit later too. So that you see that adds up to 16%, and I said 23%. That remaining 7% is simply the rest of the small business set-asides. But again, the typical contracting office they're trying to get every contract to a small business. And they really do a good job of that. Down at the bottom of the slide, you'll see the set-asides. Now, just say if you did like janitorial or cleaning or something like that, it is possible to get to a contracting officer or even somebody just on base, say at Shaw or Fort Jackson or Joint Base Charleston, that needs a small requirement accomplished. And they can do up to a micro purchase up to $10,000, and in some cases up to $25,000 on a government purchase card. So when you get into the smaller dollar amounts, it's possible that you can just do a simple credit card transaction, which is a great opportunity to get started. In all requirements below $250,000, or the SAT as we call it, the Simplified Acquisition Threshold, anything below $250,000 must be set aside for a small business. Again, that's just automatic, but most contracting offices are trying to get everything awarded to small businesses. Let me know if there were any questions.
There is one question,
Okay.
Michael, in the chat. Terrence Jackson would like to know, once a company is certified as a veteran-owned small business or DBA, how do we go about finding set-asides at the state and federal level?
Okay. Yeah. And like I said, we're going to talk, we're federal contracting here, but one of the documents that I'm going to send you is it's going to have links to the state and local, some of them at least, but definitely the state, the DOT, their websites where they post their requirements. And they also do, from time to time, they do classes. We've actually done classes with them, where they talk about their programs, we talk about ours. So that's why I always say don't just look at federal. When you go to federal contracting, of course, you're just going to go to SAM, and that's going to list all the opportunities. Because that's really, and that's toward the end here that we'll talk about, but that's really what everybody wants, right? It's good to get all these certifications and things, but that doesn't get you a contract in hand. You have to market. In fact, the document I have that we'll send you has all the points of contract or points of contact for federal and state and local agencies in the state of South Carolina. And there's websites even for other states. So we can get you in the right area to market, because that's what it ends up. That's kind of my closing thing I talk about all the time. It all ends up being marketing as a business at the end, because you have to get the contracting opportunities. So let's talk about more of the certifications here. So the woman-owned small business, and there's actually two tiers to that. There's you basically, as a woman-owned small business, I don't want to jump ahead, it'll be explained on the slides, but there's two tiers to that. The just woman-owned small business, and then the economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. So there's two certifications within the woman-owned small business. And these are going to be, you'll see some of these are a little bit redundant. These are some of the requirements for woman-owned small business certification. It's always going to be, for all the programs, 51% owned and controlled. You'll hear that a lot. So the woman that owns the company, or women, it can be more than one. It could be two owners. And as long as they own at least 51% of the company, that's one of the requirements to get certified as a woman-owned small business. You must be the highest officer, the highest position. The proper NAICS codes, because I think the next slide talks about that. There's the woman-owned small business program is kind of unique because it identifies particular NAICS codes that you are eligible for that can be done as small business set-asides. Historically underrepresented by women. So there's a list, two lists actually, one for woman-owned, one for economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. So you have to have the proper NAICS code. Like if you were a construction, that's on the list. And when you go out there, and if you were looking for opportunities, you would see those readily identified. It's going to either be a woman-owned small business set aside or an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business set aside. You have to have experience, and we say managerial experience, owned and controlled, manage daily operations. You can't just be a figurehead and somebody else is doing all the work. And there's no minimum time in business. When we get to the small disadvantaged business program, that's going to be the only one where you have to be in business 2 years, and it's usually a question that comes up. So if you registered in SAM today, like say you got fully registered in SAM, you can get a woman-owned small business set-aside contract the next day. So you don't have to be in business a particular amount of time. Kind of redundant on this one, eligibility requirements, small, for all of these, you have to be a small business and own 51% time in business and management. Here's some of the requirements to be considered an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. And you'll see this again under when we get to talking about the 8A program, there's some requirements, financial requirements. Your personal net worth has to be less than $750,000. Your 3-year average income, $350,000 or less, and all your assets, $600 million or less. And that's only, by virtue of having that ownership, you're going to be considered a woman-owned small business. If you want to be certified as economically disadvantaged, you have to meet these 3 requirements right here. And here's kind of where the split off is. So when this program first came out, the Women-Owned Small Business Program, and that was probably 8-9 years ago, and there didn't used to be a separate program. There was a goal for women-owned small businesses, but there was not a separate program. So when this program came out, and you'll find that some of the state agencies, like they consider, they roll women-owned businesses under minority groups. We have a separate one for minority groups, and we have a separate women-owned small business program. So when they first came out with this, they did a RAND study, and they said which industries are underrepresented as women-owned small businesses. So they came out with a list, and when you go to the website, this will be broken down. So there's certain NAICS codes. That's why I pointed out you have to have a certain NAICS code for the program. So there's a list of NAICS codes for women-owned small businesses, one for economically disadvantaged. And I will tell you the economically disadvantaged list is going to be primarily manufacturing codes. So if you're not a manufacturer, and you can look through the list, you may not be interested in the economically disadvantaged, because to get a contract, there's going to have to be a economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business set aside. So if you are not a manufacturer, you're basically never going to get an opportunity in that area anyway. So you want to really look at that and see if you want to do the extra. And it's not that difficult, to be honest. You still can do it and hope that these lists are updated from time to time. I think it's been over a year since they were updated, so they may add more NAICS codes to it. So you could still apply and be considered economically disadvantaged. If anything ever changed down the road, you'd already have that certification. And the rule of 2 again, you know, a lot of these programs, they will have like a sole source area they'll talk about in there. And the only way the contracting officer can get to a sole source is they would have, and I could think of one time I did it when I was a contracting officer, where I found it was something really unique, and I could not find 2 or more women-owned small businesses, or it might have been 8A at the time, that would be capable of submitting an offer. So that's the only time you really can go directly to a woman-owned small business. So it virtually never happens, is what I'm saying. Let me see if there was anything more on here. Okay, so are there any other questions on the woman-owned? And we're going to go into certified.sba.gov. They're trying to get to where all the programs are going to start off at this site. But that's always going to be a good starting point. Like just say you finish registering in SAM and you're like, okay, how do I get certified as a woman-owned small business? And it's going to tell you when you go to our website, you're going to start off at certified.sba.gov, and that's how you begin your woman-owned small business application. Are there any questions on the woman-owned small business program? I think somebody asked that, you know, what's the process? I think maybe before I even seen that question, hopefully I answered that. And all these women-owned small businesses is not too difficult. You know, a lot of times when people come to our office, and I should have mentioned it on the other slide, like if you can be certified on more than one of them, just say you're a veteran, a woman-owned small business, and a minority, which we'll talk about later. That's 3 certifications you have, and the more certifications you have, the better, because as you look through and there's different set-asides, that means you could qualify under 3 out of the 4 set-aside possibilities. So that's more opportunities for you. And this is where you're going to start off back to, and we're definitely going to go on here, beta.certify.sba.gov. Really, it'll get you there off of sam.gov now, or certify.sba.gov. And this is where you're going to do your application. And there's checklists. All of these are going to have checklists that you'll want to look through. The website's really good. The checklists are really good. So you're better off, honestly, what I tell people when you're doing these applications, you're much better off taking your time going through the application and making sure you dotted your I's and crossed your T's and get everything ready before you submit. Because I mean, if something goes wrong with your application, yeah, they're gonna come back to you. But you know, if you can get it as good as you can the first time, it's always going to be better that way. And then these are the steps: verify eligibility, answer questions. When we go on the site, there's a "Am I eligible?" area, and that's going to take you through a process where it answers questions, and it'll tell you whether you're eligible for all the programs. We'll go through that. Another thing unique about the Woman-Owned Small Business Program is, you know, I mentioned if you went to sam.com and you started putting information in there and then somebody asked you for your credit card, there are actually third-party certifiers here. And again, you'll have the slides, you'll have the links that are approved by the SBA. This is actually the only program that has approved third-party certifiers, and they'll charge you a fee to help you with the certification program. And they also have a Women's Business Enterprise certification, which is not federal, that they can assist you with too. So it's really up to you whether you want to seek third-party certification. And I would tell you, you can do the application yourself. It's not too difficult, but there's opportunities to work with these agencies here, like the U.S. Women's Chamber of Commerce. You see a lot of information out there for them too. So it's up to you. Even as I said, even some of these companies that charge fees, for these, they're not too extravagant. I couldn't tell you the price off the top of my head, but I want to say $300 or $400. But when you get into some of these other, what we call consulting companies, and they want to help you with SAM for $500, and they want to help you with woman-owned or some of the others, and like the 8A small disadvantaged business program I'll be talking about, the price gets very high for that. Like there's companies that'll charge you $5,000 or $6,000. And nobody could ever guarantee you that you're going to get a contract, because even as a contracting officer, until I put that contract in your hands and we sign off on it, you know, you don't have a contract. And even myself, depending on the dollar amount, I may have to go to a higher level through legal review to get approval before I can award you that contract. So it's not that easy. If somebody just tells you they can get you a federal contract, you know, they may be telling you a white lie, to say the least. Let's talk about service disabled veteran-owned small businesses. This is probably the easiest certification to get right now. So if you're a service disabled veteran like myself, when you go into SAM and register, it's going to ask you, are you a veteran-owned small business? Are you service disabled? Kind of the same thing with some of the requirements: 51% owned, managed and controlled. NAICS codes too. Really, this one here, when it says proper NAICS codes, they're really talking about, you know, are you a small business? Because there's no, unlike the woman-owned small business program, any NAICS code can have a small business set aside under the service disabled veteran-owned small business program. Oh, I jumped too fast there. So, I mean, that's so easy. There's only 2 slides. So when you register in SAM, you're going to say you're a veteran-owned small business and a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. And when they say service-disabled, I think all of you probably know that our veterans, if you are rated by the VA from 0 to 100% with a disability, you're considered service-disabled. So that's all you would need. Right now, the SBA takes your word for it. It's what we call self-certification. That's the only one that's truly self-certification right now. That may change somewhere down the road, but pretty much when you register in SAM, we take your word for it. If there's an issue with a contract somewhere down the road, some kind of fraud issue or something like that, and I tell everybody that because that's really for everybody, where somebody determined you weren't a veteran, or basically protested a contract and said you awarded this contract to someone who's not a service disabled veteran, then we get down into some paperwork and things like that. And I would mention too that the VA has their own program, and they actually give priority to veteran-owned small businesses and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. And when you get an email, that will have the link to take you to their site. And that's where you get started on their certification process. It is pretty intense, but it's also a great opportunity. The only time you wouldn't want that certification if you were a veteran is if you were not interested in getting a contract with the VA. And it's like, why wouldn't you do that? At some point, at least go through that process and get certified and look for opportunities with the VA, because they give the highest priority to veterans first. In fact, that's the name of the program, Veterans First program. So you can start off at their website, and again, you'll have a link to that. This right here is this is our main program that we like to talk about. And I won't say the main program because they're all important, but usually this gets one of the highest interest because it's the 8A business development program. And this is for minority owned businesses. Were there any questions on the veteran owned or the service disabled veteran owned, I should say, because the SBA does not have a program just for veteran owned small businesses, just service disabled veteran owned. Let me take a quick
There aren't any
here.
questions in the chat, Michael.
Okay, I got a nice comment there. Thank you. So 8A business development program. Now, I mentioned that when I said time in business. This is the only one that has a time in business requirement. And this is I'm jumping ahead to new slides here, but this is a 9-year business development program. So you only have 9 years to get all the benefits of the program. And that's one of the main reasons why they have this 2-year rule, being in business for 2 years, because if you just started your business, last month, and really it applies, would you be necessarily ready for federal contracts, right out of the gate? And with this program, we want to make sure that you're prepared to hit the ground running, because from experience, some people that got into the program maybe weren't quite ready. And by the time they figure out what's going on, for lack of a better way of putting it, they're in their 4th or 5th year of the program and they only have 4 years left. I can't tell you how many people have said that before. And we're here we spend a lot of time with these 8A companies, doing business development with them, trying to assist them in getting contracts and things like that. So there's a potential to get that and I really don't like to show this slide, but it's there. There are some people, I've only seen 1 or 2 that actually were able to get a waiver through that 2-year requirement. If you were to have the business management experience, technical expertise, like maybe you work for another 8A company at some point, past performance and some other requirements. And there's actually a a regulation that goes with that explains this more in detail. So if that did interest anybody when you're going through your, looking to do your application, I would always ask that you contact our office, because we can not only look up the reference, we can actually talk to people in SBA headquarters that actually look through your application. We don't approve your 8A application. We can assist you to a certain extent with your application, and actually ask questions from people up at headquarters that look through them every day. So that helps too. So here's the requirements, and there's 3 requirements that we're going to talk about. And you have to meet all 3 of the requirements. You have to be socially disadvantaged. So you see the designated groups right there: Black, Hispanic, Native American, Asian, Pacific. So if you are in one of these groups, you're automatically considered socially disadvantaged. If you were not in one of the designated groups, like I mentioned before, the women has their women-owned small business program. There's a separate program with the SBA for women, so that they're not in a designated group. But if you use that as an example, non-designated groups, it is possible to get into the program if you can show there's a preponderance of evidence where you were discriminated against over a long period of time, and you can document that. There's no hard and fast rule on what the documentation has to be. I would just say it has to be as detailed as possible, maybe have statements from other people and things like that. We do have a couple good examples of that. We've had people in the 8A program, women that had worked in corporate America that could show where they were discriminated against, so Caucasian females, for example. We had and this was a unique one, and I'm sure there's a couple other cases of it. It was a veteran who was able to show he was discriminated against, Caucasian male, again, over a period of time while in the military. Missed promotions and things like that. You see race, ethnicity, gender, physical handicap. We had a woman that was considered legally blind that was able to qualify for the program. So there are instances where it's definitely not it's definitely not that easy to get in that way, but it is possible, because like I said, we have at least 2. I can think of 2 or 3 in our portfolio of, we probably have like 33 certified firms in the state right now. So that's number 1 requirement. The second requirement, economically disadvantaged. And you must be economically disadvantaged to get into the program. So your personal net worth has to be less than $750,000. And I will tell you that actually changed probably about a year ago. It used to be 250,000. So that really lifting that requirement. It used to be you had to be below 250,000. And then once you get into the program, it jumped up to 750,000. So now they just made it a straight 750K. So that should open it up to a lot more people. And I have seen an increase in applications as a result of that. Your 3-year average income has to be below $350,000, similar to these are actually identical to the woman-owned small business for economic disadvantage. So it makes it easier to remember. And all your assets have to be below $6 million. And you see there the asterisks, and I could have mentioned that on the woman-owned also, your personal net worth. So if some of you are close to that, you want to look at your RRA and your equity in your home and things like that. So there are a lot of good equity in your business too. So there, if your starting point were say at $1 million, you can fairly easily get that, easily get that down below 750,000. So there are some considerations in there. And again, that's one of those where if you feel like you're at the tipping point of that, you're not sure you're quite below, that's always a question you can come to us and ask. And we can see, look at your financial data and see if there's a way to get you under that requirement. So the 3 things, again, to recap, was that you have to be in business for 2 years. socially disadvantaged and economically disadvantaged. And I usually try to remember this: if you're on the call and you fit those, you think you may be eligible as an 8A firm, try to shoot one of us an email. Reply to the email I send out. I'll copy some of our business opportunity specialists, because we're definitely always looking for good 8A contractors in the state of South Carolina. We only have and we just recently got 3 or 4 new ones, which is pretty good for the year. I think we had 5 or 6 for the whole year, and that's actually really good compared to what it has been the last couple of years. The process, they've tried to streamline it as much as they can so that you have more opportunities. I guess I would say, so it's easier to get certified. Nothing's ever that easy, but it's easier. When I first started in the SBA, everything was all paper-based, and when we got a new 8A company, we would have a 3-foot high pile of paperwork and brown folders to go through, and that was what you had to go through for the application. They've made it; it's all online. It's streamlined. It's much easier than it used to be. So this is the perfect opportunity if you fit those 3 requirements to try to get in the 8A program. So when you do get in, the participation I mentioned before, it was it's a 9-year business development program, because what we want you to start off in the program, and by the time you graduate, you're a viable small business where you can get out there and compete with other small businesses for contracts, whether government or commercial. So the first years 1 to 4 is the developmental phase, and one thing under the 8A program, and it may be on the next couple slides, but I'll share that with you now, is you can get sole source contracts. Anything below $4 million can be awarded directly to an 8A. So that's the kind of golden ticket that sets the 8A apart from some of the other ones. You can get those sole source contracts, and there's a lot of those to be had, especially this time of year, because they're fairly quick to negotiate an award. You're always going to negotiate with a contracting officer to get a fair and reasonable price before contract award, and the contracting officer always wants you to be successful. Last thing they want to do is have you fail on a contract, because it causes some problems. So hopefully they'll work with you. Those are processed through our office, and I won't get all into that because it really doesn't matter until you get into the program. Then them first 4 years, we're trying to get you a lot of those sole source contracts to get opportunities and grow your business. And then as you get into the transitional year, we want you to be more competitive on some of the small business set-asides. And even the 8A, I should have mentioned, if it's above $4 million, then they can compete it. They can do an 8A competitive contract award where only 8A certified businesses compete for that contract. And once you get in, I mentioned that earlier, like if you were to get one of those consulting companies to help you, and they did your whole application for you, and you got in the program, which quite honestly, I haven't seen an instance where somebody said, I paid someone $5,000 or $6,000 and it sped up the process. I've seen actually the opposite in some cases. So that's a judgment call you'll have to make. Whether you're going to pay somebody to assist you, I would say try, do it yourself and get assistance from us and our resource partners. So once you get into, every year we have to do what's called the annual review. So we basically validate that you're still eligible for the program. And anytime something changes, you have to let us know. And again, this is nothing worth spending a lot of time on today, because if you got into the program, we bring you in for an initial orientation, and we get down into the nitty gritty, and you maintain your profiles on SAM and DSBS. And when you do register in SAM, that's worth mentioning too. One of the keys to registering in SAM is that you're visible to the contracting officers, because when they get an opportunity, they'll go out and search SAM in what's called Dynamic Small Business Search, which is a database that's linked off of SAM. And when you register in SAM, at some point, I recommend you'll see a box that says, and that's in our tip sheet too, that it'll say, do you want to put your data in DSBS, Dynamic Small Business Search? So it'll take what's in SAM and it'll let you add, it'll carry all that information in, and it'll let you add some things like past performance and things of that nature, things that contracting officers are interested in. So when they do market research and they're looking at, woman-owned small businesses or 8As, or some of the service disabled veterans, things like that, and they're considering doing a set aside, you want them to see you. That's one of the main purposes of getting registered in SAM, besides the mandatory requirement. Oh, and see, I jumped ahead a little bit, but again, the orientation we'll do once you get into the program. We'll provide you resource partner referrals and training. There's a lot of training classes, and actually a lot of the training we do is called, and I should have mentioned the 8A, when that keyword that some of you probably heard. It's the Small Disadvantaged Business Program with 8A certification, and 8A is 8A of the Small Business Act that was passed, I think in the 1950s, and to implement the program. There's also what's called 7J of the Small Business Act, and that was to implement some of the training requirements for 8A participants. But even the 7J training, some of you may have seen some of them opportunities. We open that up really to other small businesses in the state. So there's always going to be training opportunities out there, just like the one you're on right now. We assist with helping the 8A businesses market, and there's also surety bonds, and that really applies to anybody, any small business that's interested. Like if you do construction contracts, we talked about this a little bit the other day, and you were in, if you were a construction type company, when you get awarded a contract, one of the requirements for construction contracts is that you have surety bonds. It's kind of like an insurance policy. So if you were to walk off the job or something went bad, that we could go back out and find another contractor to finish. That's the simplest way to explain it. And there's a whole, you'll have that website too, linked off of SBA.gov. If you're interested in getting surety bonds, what happens is you could work through your own surety bond company without the SBA involved, but the SBA also has a program to help people get started. Maybe they look at your financial data and stuff like that, kind of like SBA loans. The SBA backs the loans, the SBA backs the surety bonds. So that's another opportunity out there for some of you. Let's see. Let me see, are there, before I get into the application, let's see what we got here. Any other chat questions?
Yes, sir, Michael. There is one. Carnegie Johnson would like to know, is federal contract and readiness training offered by the South Carolina SBA?
Yes, that's it. That's actually one of the 7J classes. And I will tell you, if you go to our calendar, there may be some showing on there right now. And that's a great program too, because it's kind of rolls into what we're talking about today, but they put a lot more hands-on. And that's one of the 7J programs. One of the questions I said is, are you ready? And that's what they call the 8A readiness program. So there are classes for that too, because I would highly encourage you, if you're interested, to take one of those classes. And we usually link them off our website at sba.gov /SC. Ruffing, RUFFIN, is the contractor that the SBA hires to do those classes, and they're excellent. And reach out to us too, just in case if you don't see anything and you're interested in that, reach out to us on that email, because that would be actually if you thought you met the 3 requirements, when you reply to us by email, we will actually direct you to do that class too, if possible. I mean, it's like a 6-week class, but it's very beneficial. Any other questions? Oh, great. Nice. Cherise, thanks for inserting that website too, because those are some of the ones you'll have, and it'll take you right directly to that 8A process and what you got to do right here before the application. And these are things we already talked about. You're going to want to get registered in SAM. So you get your DUNS number, figure out your NAICS code. And I should have mentioned that during SAM too. When you register in SAM, you have to put at least 1 NAICS code in there. So just say if you did construction, you would put in 236220, but there's multiple other NAICS codes that you can put in there. You can put electrical, plumbing, concrete, drywall, roofing, there's multiple codes. So on your initial application for SAM, like if you're in a hurry and you just want to get registered, it's not a problem if you only put a couple NAICS codes in there. You could always go back and update that later. And most people, I think when you start doing some research and like if you do IT, for example, there's multiple codes. You may think you know the NAICS code for your business, and then when you start looking on opportunities, I'm used to saying federal business opportunities because that's what you could still get to the right area if you put it in fbo.gov, but it's all in SAM now. So even when you were looking, scanning around for opportunities, you might see something and you're like, I can do this. And then you find the corresponding NAICS code, and then you load that code to your profile in SAM. You can load as many as you want. You can have 2 or 3 codes. You can have 200 codes. There's hundreds of codes. But what you're doing there is you're telling the contracting officer, I have the capabilities to do this type of work. So you don't want to put something in there that you can't do. If you're an IT company and then somehow randomly you put a code in for plumbing, and the contracting officer was looking at that, they would that would throw up a flag like, you do plumbing too? That's kind of strange. Maybe you could, but you have to really look through there. So application for certification, when you go to the website, it's going to have a application guide, checklist, everything. I think this is most critical for the 8A program, is to gather all your supporting documentation. It's kind of like when you do your taxes and you got to get everything together before you apply, because if you follow the checklist and get all your information together, and you will need tax returns and things of that nature, and business financials, your balance sheet, profit and loss statements and things like that. So in the checklist, will tell you everything you need. With all that said, once you submit your application, when they look at your application, and I say SBA headquarters, they're going to really scrutinize it. They could ask you almost anything, really, because what happens is when you get into the 8A program, you get a contract under the 8A program, the SBA is really accepting that contract on your behalf. So they want to make sure you're legit and everything lines up accordingly. So I ain't going to say it's easy to get into the 8A program. I will say it's a lot easier than it used to be. So if you get all your information together, we used to tell people it took 6 to 12 months, and some people it took 2 years. But if you get all your information together, you submit your application, they come back, you usually get a reply fairly quickly, and they'll come back and tell you you're missing some documentation, or we got to have a couple questions. As long as they keep communicating back with you and you can answer the questions, you're still in the game. You still have an opportunity to get certified in the 8A program. So, the people that get in are pretty much relentless, and they go back, they read through it. And it's not uncommon that you could say, I already gave you this, and you send it to them again, because they look through, they look through hundreds of applications, so they're not perfect either. Nobody is. So as long as you're applying and making progress, maybe they identified 8 discrepancies and you tried to clear all 8, of course, and then you cleared 6 of them and you have 2 left, just keep going. And you'll get certified and work with us too. There's a knowledge base where it has some common questions when you get into the application, and you're going to apply online. See, I could click on that link right now, but I'm going to go there anyway. You're going to apply online and get started on certified.sba.gov. And there's the site right there. Okay, before we get into HubZone, which is our last area, are there any questions on the 8A program?
Michael, there wasn't one on the 8A, but one of the participants had a question, would like to know how to search for and find the right NICS code for her business. Who is it? What's the question?
I see that. Executive Tracy Powell, executive coach and trainer, teaching. When we go to the website, we can put in areas like that. Like you can put in a keyword and try to find an applicable NAICS code that it fits under, and usually it'll be like your description right there. Probably education would come up with something, or sometimes even consulting will come up with codes. There's probably like at least 2 or 3 that might fit under there. And we'll get on that website and go through there after I go through these last few slides here. All right, I think, was that the only question for now?
Yes, sir. Okay,
great. Let's go through HubZone. Historically underutilized business zone. And when you look at some of the purposes there, I'm not going to read them to you, but I already mentioned high unemployment, economically depressed areas. So we're trying to improve these areas, right? Eligibility and requirements: 51% owned and owned by a U.S. citizen is a requirement too for all of them. There's 2 main things for the HubZone program. And again, this is also certification is done at SBA through SBA headquarters. We can assist, but they make the final decisions. So your principal office must be located in the HubZone area. And when you go to the website, sba.gov/HubZone, there is actually a map. We'll try to spend some time on there. I'm doing pretty good on time, so hopefully we can get on the map too. So when you go to the HubZone site, there is a map there. You can put in your address. Like we usually, as an example, we put 1835 Assembly Street, Columbia, South Carolina, and it'll show on the map that's in a HubZone area. So you must first determine that your office is in the HubZone area. Through that map. That's the only way really to 100% verify that. You can pull the map up and scroll through it, but you and I can be across the street from each other, and I'm in a HubZone and you're not. So you really have to put that address in to determine you're in a HubZone location. And 35% residency requirement. 35% of your employees, you remember I said high unemployment areas, must reside in a HubZone. Now, if using our office as an example, if that was where the business was located, I live in Sumter, South Carolina. And if I lived in a HubZone, I would meet that requirement, and I just drive back and forth to Columbia like I do now. So it can be a HubZone in another area too. So now when you get to that 35%, right, just say my example, you may only have 3 employees if you're just starting out. So right now, as of today, just say 2 out of 3 of your employees, and yet one of them can be you also. live in a hub zone, you'd be at 66%, right? And then Monday morning, your employee, like say it's me, I live in Sumter, and I come in Monday and I said, hey, guess what? I moved this weekend. And the first question you're going to ask me is, where did you move to? And then you look up my address and you find out I moved out of a hub zone. You know, I'm no longer in a hub zone. So now your percentage just dropped to 33%. So you're below the line on that 35%. Now, one thing the SBA has done that has really helped a lot is when that situation happens, it is much more, you know, much more reasonable, for lack of a better word, that you have time to get back above that 35% threshold. You don't instantly lose your certification. You know, because the question is, if I just moved, you know, I know I'm a good worker, so you're not going to fire me. You know, you're not going to get rid of me because I moved. So do you hire somebody else, or do you lose that certification? And you start asking yourself, you know, you're making business decisions. You know, do you have any contracts as a result of being hub zone certified? Even when you're looking at, you know, say your office is not in the hub zone, you know, do you want to pick up and move your whole office into a hub zone area just for the potential that you might get contracts? Or, you know, you want to do some research is what I'm saying. You don't want to just make a business decision and pick up. Now, if you're just running a small space, you know, it makes it easier. But if you had facilities, you would really think hard about it. You know, what kind of opportunities. There's no guarantees that you'll get a contract just because you're in a hub zone or you're hub zone certified. So you really have to look at that. You have to be a small business, of course. And the last one's kind of redundant. You have to be in the hub zone location. Now, one thing we do is we do visits. So when you get hub zone certified, especially if you get a lot of contracts, we get lists down from SBA headquarters, and we do visits every year. You know, a percentage of hub zone certified firms. So we actually come out normally under normal circumstances. Of course, everybody's been working from home a lot, so we have done these virtually too. But normally we would come to your place of visit, business unannounced, and make sure that you actually are running your business out of that area. Again, that's protection for everybody, because if you were a hub zone certified and you came in second place and you knew the person that won that contract was not in a hub zone, or they had an office they didn't really work out of, you know, you could protest that contract. So it's to protect everybody. So we do hub zone visits, and I've had some very interesting ones. I could tell probably 5 or 6 stories, but just one somewhere down in the Beaufort area several years ago. I went to verify that a business was located there. I went down a dirt road, drove for like 2 miles. There was and I'm following my Google map or my GPS, and there was an iron gate that had a lock on it, but it was open. So I swung it open, drove through there, and my GPS at some point said, "You have arrived," and I was in the middle of nowhere. So I was like, okay, maybe there's not a business here. As I was going back to get back through the gate, because I was worried about getting locked in behind me, I seen out of the corner of my eye a home, and it had like large buildings behind it. So it ended up being an actually legitimate business. It just didn't get me right to the exact location. So that's what we do. We just come by and make sure that you're operating out of the location. And there's criteria we mentioned, make sure you meet it. And there's a recertification process. Actually, they changed that a little bit. The full recertification is every 5 years now, but they do like kind of like the 8A program. They do a certification every year now. And it's pretty straightforward. And the hub zone, I will tell you, has great support too. When you go on the website, there's they do like weekly call-ins and things like that for people that have questions. There's a great frequently asked question document at the website. So there's a lot of good information there. But I think the most important thing for the hub zone, like if you're already in a hub zone location, the location is probably the easier part. It's the, keeping the employees at the 35% gets a little difficult. So, but if you already knew you met that requirement, we used to tell people try to stay at 50% to compensate for changes. That would be a certification you would want to get, because you do some market research and see what kind of set asides are out there for hub zones. Like if you do construction, I can guarantee you'd see a lot of hub zone set asides out there. Something else I wouldn't know off the top of my head, how many you'd have to do some market research. There's also, when you look through this, and again, there's actually a hub zone primer, like a class you can do online that you can go complete, and it'll be some of the stuff I talked about. Kind of redundant again, DUNS number, NAICS code, register, and SAM. Review the application guide. Gather, this sounds just like the previous slide. Excuse me. Gather your information. And now this is one thing that's a little bit different here. Apply using the general login system. This is the last, oops, I'm sorry, I clicked too fast on there. This is the last program where you actually have to go somewhere other than certify.sba.gov. Is you have to go into a different system called the general login system. And the website will take you exactly where you need to go. Eventually, hopefully this year, that is also going to be under the certify area. And when I go to this website here, you'll see that it'll take you there. And kind of the same thing with documentation, get everything together and verify. So here's our points of contact. That was the last slide. And you will have these, and all of these people, myself included, will be on the email you get. So you'll have good contact with us, and somebody will always answer your questions. Even if we recommended that you go to one of our resource partners, we'll always answer your question and get the answer for you. Let's see if there's any other questions. Anything in the chat? No?
No, sir.
Let's see if I can, I had some share screens in here. Try this again. Let's see, I'll do it this way. I'll go back and click on, I was trying to share the websites I have open. Let me make sure I got these open still. All right. And if there's any questions, let me try this once more. Here we go. Okay, hopefully you can see that certify.sba.gov pop up there.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So here's the website I want to go to first. So this is a starting point for applications. Again, it's everything but the Hub Zone program. But one good tool here is this Am I Eligible? If you click on that tab, you'll have a direct link to this. Is there a SBA contracting program for me? And it'll say 8A woman-owned Hub Zone. And then it doesn't show service disabled veteran owned because that is so simple. It's just self-certification, and you're just going to put that in SAM that you're a veteran owned or service disabled veteran owned. So some of this is all the things we talked about. So you go through this am I eligible screen here, and I'm going to run you through this, and you just answer the questions. And the question here is to the left, and then the detailed information is to the right here. So are you I'm not going to read this all to you because you can go back through anyways. Are the qualifying individuals of the firm U.S. citizens? And I'll tell you what that means here. And you just say yes. 51% ownership of the firm. And you're going to say yes. And it talked about control there. I could have showed you, but are you organized for profit? Now, see, I said this right up front. Nonprofit entities are ineligible to participate in most of the small business programs. And there's a couple exceptions. So if you were a nonprofit and you're on the call and you have other questions, come back to us, and we can get you. A lot of times we refer you to our resource partners too. We can get you in some other areas. I'm going to say yes here. Do you affirm that this firm or any of its owners have ever been debarred or suspended? And that's a bad word. like if you previously had a business and something bad happened, nice way to put it, and you were debarred, you're not eligible to do work for the federal government, that would be an issue. So you're going to say, do you affirm? And some of the questions you'll want to say, no, I've never been debarred, but it says, do you affirm that you haven't been debarred? So you can say yes. Does the firm have a place of business within the U.S. and primarily operate? So you kind of get a feel for some of the questions that have to be yes, right? Is firm considered as small in accordance with the NAICS code? And somebody asked a question on that. And here's a link to the size standards. So there's a whole spiel here about that. If you do not know the NAICS code, you can go to this site right here. I have that opened up, and we'll try to go in there too. Let's see if I click on it, if it'll let me go there, since I know somebody had a question. Did it by any chance go right to the screen, or do I have to reshare that?
It went to the screen, Michael.
Okay, great. So this was, since we're on here, I'll take a shortcut and I'll go through this. So somebody had asked, like, how do you find your NAICS code? And that's a common question. So I'm going to put in a key word here. I'm going to put education. Go there, and it'll come up with the definition. Continue education seminars or conferences, educational consultants, curriculum development services. And I'm not sure, let's just put that one in there as an example. So a lot of times when you go in here, you may have to spend a little bit of time. So it'll give you the code, and it'll tell you what that really means. Consulting, testing, provide job training for the and things like that. Can't remember for sure if that fit the one somebody asked about. If you want to ask any other questions on that particular one. I think it was teaching, right?
Yes, this is Dr. Powell. So this is very helpful. So because most of the time when I go in, the only ones I could find was under teaching,
Right.
But the education one seemed
Yep.
to work. So I plan to look at teaching, education, and consulting as well,
Right.
to see what I can find.
Yeah, and it gets very interesting looking at these, because I just remember this one class, and the lady had a business where she did porta potties. So the porta potties like you see at the state fair and things like that. And if you went in here and you punched in porta potty, it's not going to come up with anything. So we put in toilet, and then hopefully I can still find that. And if there's another one, we can do one or two more examples. That's not even the one. Somehow we found portable toilets. Let me try that again. Now I'm kind of curious. and it actually fit right into what she did. In fact, that was a really interesting one because there we go. Portable toilets, you know, renting, servicing. That's exactly where she fell in, because she would, you know, drop off the portable toilets. You do the servicing and you pick them back up when you're done. And there's actually was pretty good opportunities there. That's kind of a unique thing where, you know, sometimes if the, you know, a federal agency or somebody else are doing some kind of project and they need some of those, maybe it's included in the construction contract, or they, you know, when you talk about contracting too, you know, sometimes there's subcontracting opportunities. Maybe you can't do the primary contract, but you can do a sub, like say if you did electrical and you get to know some of the large, you know, I won't say large businesses, they're probably still small, but construction is common where they use a lot of subcontractors. So subcontracting can be a good thing too. You know, if you do janitorial, landscaping, portable toilets as an example, and you get a good construction company that you work with and they call you to subcontract on some of their larger contracts, that's a good opportunity to get your foot in the door and get used to doing federal contracts. I mean, that's actually a great way, because then you can get a feel for it. You know, I know businesses that's all they do is subcontracts. You know, they don't, they don't, the good part of that is you only have to worry about your small area, because the contracting officer, like when I was one, I don't really care who their subs are so much, because unless there's problems, I'm going to the person that signed the contract. So they have to deal with their subs, you know, on their own. So that's opportunities there. In fact, one of the websites you'll get, it has what's called subcontracting opportunities to look at. Any other one you want to look at real quick, just as an example? See it. Oops, sorry. Scroll down there. Okay. And that's pretty straightforward. Now let me see if it's gonna, probably won't let me out of here. I'll probably have to reshare. Oh wait. Maybe it'll let me backspace that way. Can you see back to the certified web page?
Yes, it's displayed.
Oh, okay, good. Wasn't sure if that would work. Okay, so good. It left me off at that question right there. So when you say yes here, you really, they're going to ask you for a NAICS code. Like say if you're woman owned, right? And we mentioned that before, only certain NAICS codes fall under the woman owned small business. So I'm going to put one in that I know is on the list. It's going to be construction 236220, and then it's going to find the NAICS, and then it's going to say, are you economically disadvantaged? And again, off to the side here, it's going to show you the numbers I basically went over. Your personal income 350, personal net worth below 750, and total assets below 6 million. And again, most of these are in the manufacturing areas, but I would encourage you to look on the list when you start going through that process. I'm going to say yes. Are you interested in participating in the 8A program? And again, this, I like this. This is you know, it's actually a good review of the class too. You know, I could almost teach the whole class out here because it has a lot of the things that were on the slides, the numbers again. So I'm going to say yes. And there you go, some more details that we already went over. Like if you said no, you know, it's going to say you're, you know, it's going to take you into the presumed group or something like that. So I'm going to say yes. Do you consider yourself socially disadvantaged because you experience bias of a critical nature, substantial nature? And you're going to say yes there. Has the firm been previously certified as an 8A? That's a one-time good deal. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but you can't, it's a 9-year program. Once your 9 years are over, you're done. One-time deal. So here, have you previously been certified? I'm going to say no, because of course I'm trying to get in the 8A program for the first time. Has anyone claiming social disadvantage used their one-time eligibility? And I'm going to say no here. Is the address where you're in located in, hey, this is a good transition. I'm going to try this again. So it's asking about hub zone, right? And is your business in a hub zone? And you may not know, right? So when you look here, more details, use the hub zone map. Let's go right on there. And now if anybody has an address they want to try, if not, I'll put in our office address. I'll put that in first. It'll probably pop right up. Here we go. So this is where the SBA office is. And you'll see, and they've really improved this map. It's Google based now. It used to have its own, I don't even know what the program was it used. And it really just jumps right out at you now. It used to be, it's like green, qualified hub zone. So if you punch your address in, it's going to tell you if you're in a hub zone or not. And when you go into the, let's see here. Trying to click down here. If you remember when I said you and I can be across the street from each other, this is very close to that right there, because you see where that dot is. So you can kind of scroll out and it'll show you, and you probably can't see this too good because it's a small screen, but it'll show you where the hub zone maps are. And you'll see to the left here, like the census tract, there's county hub zones also, which is fairly new. So anytime you see something here, I mean, it's going to tell you anyways. If it's Indian land, that's automatically considered a hub zone. So some of these other ones expiring, we do a census every 10 years. They have, with the COVID, they have, I couldn't even tell you the exact numbers off the top of my head, or dates, but they have really expanded on the time, like say they did a census in 2020, they've already extended that, I want to say to 2023, but don't quote me on that. So you normally at some point when a new census is done, like our building actually, it was in a hub zone, then it was not, then it was. So it does change from time to time. And a lot of times, somebody, you may look at it and wonder, why is this not considered a hub zone? You look around, they have all kinds of data they go through. That's not our decision we make. It's up at a higher level by law. They figure out these hub zone areas. So we can't change them. It is what it is. So when you look up your address, it'll tell you. Does anyone have an address they want me to punch in? Oh, here we go. That's a good one. I found it. And that's a great example. Thank you for that one. Because like I said, the county one is fairly new. That just started last year. And that one's identified. It's in a qualified hub zone area. So again, we can expand out. I'm trying to remember what county that is.
That's Lee County.
Lee County, thank you. Right next to me, I'm in Sumter County. Okay, so if you scroll out here, you can see the whole county will be marked. So it's always good to put the address in. Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to do it because you can't get any easier than that. It's qualified hub zone. So you know what? If you didn't do that, and you went through all that trouble and submitted your application, guess what? The first thing that they're going to look at when they look at your application is they're going to go right here and make sure you're in a hub zone area. Were there any others? Let me look in the chat. Okay,
Michael, we did have a couple of questions that.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, and I'll just keep plugging these in.
Yes, sir. One participant wanted to know, do I need to be certified to do business as to do subcontracts?
No, you do not, because you're when you're a subcontractor, you're basically entering into a contract with the prime. Now, I will tell you, there's some cases where prime contractors are looking for minority business, actually a lot of cases, so that still can help, but no, you don't have to be. Any other questions? I just pulled up that other and hey, we're batting 1,000 today so far, because
Actually, there's one that came into the chat. It said, one of the viewers wanted to know, it said, I have received my certification for SCDOT in small and minority business contracting and certification recently. Other than doing instructional certifications, I have not entered a contractual agreement. In order to establish a past performance history and jump right in, what would be a good starting point?
Yeah, and I would ask if you have any other than government ones, like commercial, like when you go to dynamic small business search and you put past performance in there, it doesn't have to be federal contracting. If you did landscaping or construction or something, and you put, you constructed a church or something like that, homes even, that's good. That's the starting point, because it is, and that's a great question, because a lot of times it ends up being, where do I get started kind of thing. Like if you don't have past performance, if you have some of the certifications, that's always helpful. And, sometimes you might do something really small to get started. When I was at Shaw Air Force Base, I still remember one of our 8A contractors, and it probably was the first contract I remember them doing. And they did like a fire sprinkler system in one of the child care centers. And, they had to jump through a lot of hoops, and it was like $160,000 contract. And they did really good on that. They started doing a couple other smaller ones, and then they progressed, and they were one of our most successful 8A contractors or small disadvantaged businesses. So a lot of times it's a matter of getting that first opportunity, even like we said with a government purchase card. If you did something small first, you just want to get that first opportunity is what you're looking for. There's no advice I could give you other, you want to market to get that first opportunity. Because it's kind of like construction. Just say you hadn't had much past performance, you had small, $3,000-4,000 work, maybe 10 or 12,000, and then you see a requirement out there for, $12 million. Realistically, when you're competing with other companies, where do you fall into place? You're probably not going to get one of those right off of the bat. You have to work your way up to that. So there's, you have to get to the starting point.
A couple more questions, Michael. The next one, viewer wants to know, how do we find a list of codes for women-owned business? Okay,
and that's going to be off of the website. There's a direct link to the, if you went sba.gov/WOSB and went on our website, there's going to be a list there. In fact, when you go through, you start your application, it's going to take you there too. But like I said, you'll have a link to that. somebody asked a really good question I see here, and I should have mentioned it too. So with the 8A program, is it still permissible to work a regular job? Or is 8A considered to be the full-time job? 8A is considered to be the full-time job. You know, and that's one of the double-edged swords. I still remember somebody that had I can't remember what they did, but they had a full-time job, and they were kind of going back and forth whether they wanted to apply for the program and give up their day job. And I think they ultimately didn't apply. So it's kind of a decision you have to make. That's one of the questions, you know, when you get into when you come in part of the application, they'll ask you that question too. They'll also ask you where all your revenues were. So just to, when you apply, just say you were applying under because you do have to apply under a specific NAICS code for the 8A program. So just say you were applying for construction. You said, I want to be an 8A in construction. And then when you submit all your tax returns and business financials and things like that, and if it was all in a different area, they're not going to let you come into the program under the construction area. They're going to figure out where most of your revenues are. And that's where you would come into the program, where your revenues are. It kind of makes sense. 99% of the time, that's what happens anyway. But yeah, that is a consideration. Even when you're in the program, when we do the annual review, that's one of the questions. Do you have another job? There are you know, 100% dedicated to the job. There are some exceptions to that, but that has to be identified. Like if you did something that only took up, you know, a small amount of your time, it's possible. But if you were, you know, running a business and then you worked a full-time job, that's not gonna work, because you just wouldn't have the time. Most people can't do that anyways. You know, they might have a side job or something like that, or they may have a full-time job and then have a little side business like landscaping or something like that. But that doesn't always work well in government contracting. All right. I think maybe this is one I didn't get. Since I'm on this screen, I'll just plug in. Is there any other questions? Oh, there's the first not qualified. So we had really good, that'll be the last one I'll do. And we had really good examples there, because there's one that's not qualified. Now, that's where you ask the question, would you want to move into this little area here? Probably not. Actually, a big area if you go down south a little bit. But that's kind of where you look at, is it beneficial to move your whole company? If you just had a little office and you were leasing it or something like that, maybe. If you work out of your home, no, you're not going to move. Do you move just to get in a hub zone area with no guarantee that you're going to get contracts? I would say in most cases, you probably won't want to do that. Okay. Can you see this one now, the certified part still?
Yes, and
okay.
One other question came in too, real quick.
Yep.
Michael, business owner would like to know, once they are registered and have their SAM and receive their NICS number and their DUNS number to learn on the job, how do they contact or become a subcontractor to earn while they're learning at the same time?
Yeah, and there's a couple good ways. I mentioned that before. There's a website called Subnet, and you'll have a link to that where you can look for subcontracting opportunities. And it really has a lot to do with what you do, because depending on what you do, that would depend on what kind of subcontracting opportunities are out there. And it's quite possible there might not be any. It depends what it is. You just sell a product, for example. You wouldn't get any subcontracting areas that way. Construction is just like prevalent. That's one of the main areas. Somebody that is like a consulting kind of company, that's another possible example. Just say there's a large requirement to provide IT services. So you hire people to do, work a help desk. Maybe it's a big contract. They have like 60 people they provide, and you could do some certain area, maybe that just a help desk answering the phone kind of thing. That's a subcontracting opportunity. So a lot depends on what you do. And you can reach out to us with that if you want, and we could probably steer you in the right direction if there is any out there. When you go into the SAM, I'll try to go on there too. When you go into SAM to register, that's also where you're going to go to look for opportunities too. And they used to have, if you found like a big construction project, there's a tab for interested vendors where you can put your information in there. So maybe somebody that gets the large contract is looking for subs, and they scroll through there and find you. We do have in our office, a lot of times we'll get emails like from a larger business. I mean, again, they may still be small, but they're a little larger, and they want a contract. Just say they're out of Georgia or something, and they got a contract at Charleston. Sometimes they'll reach out to our office and say, hey, we have this contract, we're looking for subcontractors, and we'll send that around and see if we can find anybody.
Michael, I had another good question that came in. Business owner wanted to know if the company is a partnership, would both owners need to work the business full time to be eligible?
Ooh, that's a great question, actually. You'd start looking at percentage of ownership, where you get the 51% owned. It could get kind of complicated. That would probably be one where I'd need more details, but just say if one person owned 51% and they were dedicated, 100% to the company, and then you had somebody else that was a part owner, that would probably be fine. Just say if both of you own 50%, which equals 100%, because it can be more than one owner. And we actually had a good 8A firm that was like that. They each own 50%. Then you'd get into issues there. So that would be, it can be kind of complicated depending on the ownership, who owns what. Because anytime somebody owns 10% or more in the company, they're required to submit some paperwork. So that would get scrutinized. While I'm here, I'm going to put yes for 35%. That was the last question anyway, 35% of your employees. So at the end of this, you're going to go, it's going to tell you what programs you're eligible for. In the way I answered it, I answered it in a way where it would show you're eligible for most of the programs, or all of the programs actually. And then you see when you click on how to apply, I'm going to click on, let's try clicking on the economically disadvantaged. Any other questions out there?
No, sir.
Okay, great. So here's, and again, you're going to have a link directly to this also. It'll take you right to the different areas. And you'll see all of these websites are all going to be based off of SBA.gov. It's just if I can get you directly into the right area, it'll take you less time. But it's fairly easy. So when you look at this, the woman-owned program, right? It'll tell you about the benefits, right? And right here, SBA maintains a list of those eligible industries. That was a question somebody had. So let's click on it. So you can scroll through down here, and here's some of the NAICS codes. And you see it'll have the description, and it'll have set aside, and it'll say woman-owned small business set aside. So as you scroll through here, like I use construction as an example. So in the contracting officer does the same thing. They're going to have to go here. And if they were doing a construction contract 236220, they can only do a woman-owned small business set aside. They cannot do an economically disadvantaged. Let me see. I don't remember if they. This is all the woman-owned. Site preparation. There's all kinds of. Here's one manufacturing on that one. And I think the date on there actually, okay, here we go. That's what I was looking for. So here's some of the set-asides to the right there. Also economically disadvantaged. And you can download this list too. I just scrolled through since it was right there. So you'll see what I was talking about when you look at the economically disadvantaged here. Most of it's in manufacturing. So if you were looking at it from that aspect, then you can download, I believe you can download one of the lists for woman-owned and one of the lists for economically disadvantaged. But you can see virtually all of the ones that have economic disadvantage are in manufacturing. When you scroll through here, this is an all-inclusive list, but again, you can download them. Optical instrument, lens manufacturing, economically disadvantaged. So that's what I was saying on one of the slides, that the majority of the economically disadvantaged are going to be for manufacturing type companies. So in most cases, for most of you out there, I would pretty much be sure most of you would fall under the woman-owned small business category. And I would say you can do the economically disadvantaged. But if you don't do manufacturing, there's not going to be much opportunities there. So it's a matter of if you want to take the extra effort to do the economic disadvantage or not. Let's scroll up here. So see, you can download a spreadsheet here, and that'll break it all down. Let's go back. So that answers, somebody had that question, so that answers that question. And then here it'll take you to the process right here. You go to the certify site. There's frequently asked questions. That's what I say. Our website is very good. Like if you spend the extra time looking through here, reading, you know, it kind of goes through all the things we talked about too, the eligibility requirements. See the numbers there again. And then you just go get started with your application. And again, that's one of the, you know, it's not too difficult to, the ones that get a little more difficult are probably going to be the, you know, the hub zone and the 8A. And the hub zone would be a little more difficult, and the 8A probably a lot more difficult. Let's see here. Well, did the SAM site come up there? I just went to another tab. I'm not sure if it would just automatically come up.
Yes, it did.
Okay, great. So here's another starting point, SAM. And this site has changed. It's, I'll just say it's different. So when you look at different areas, now I mentioned this before, like if you're looking for contracting opportunities, you know, it was fbo.gov. If you punch that in there still, it would take you to here. But here's some of the contracting opportunities. And the other day, Angela went on here too. And there's, you know, there's a lot of contracting opportunities out here. And if you go into this, if you just went here and you put in construction or something, it's going to show nationwide everything that's out there for construction. If you go into this advanced tab, and you can still put keywords in there, but you see all these drop down boxes. you can search by set-aside programs, like we were talking about, you know, what's out there for 8As, hub zones, service disabled, woman owned. So it's kind of like any other database. You know, a lot of times you start off at a large macro view and you're like, okay, there's like 14,000 contracts nationwide. Am I willing to go anywhere? I think the one Angela pulled up the other day was in Puerto Rico. So it's like, am I willing to travel to Puerto Rico for a contract before I even go any further? And if the answer is no, maybe you want to narrow it down. Maybe you want to just look in South Carolina for now and see what's out there. When you're looking at something unique that you do, then you may want to put in the NAICS code. Let me see if I can do that. You know, you don't really care what kind of set aside it is right now because you're just trying to narrow it down a little bit. Like here's place of performance, and you can put in zip code or the state. Let's see, more filters. So just by me doing this, you can tell, like here's NAICS code. Oops, that's already selected. I was trying to figure out a way to just search by NAICS code, but let's just try South Carolina for now because I just want to show you an example. You can kind of see that you're going to have to spend some time here, and I mean honestly, there's some companies where you know, they've got a person that's spending, you know, a good many hours just on looking for opportunities out there. Because it's always going to be the same thing, right? You're going to find the opportunity and then see if that works. Not sure why this is not working here. Let's try it a different way. Let's see if anything comes up there. Okay, I'm not having any luck with this. Oh, there we go. There we go. Maybe it was down there and I didn't scroll down, but here's some things that are out there in South Carolina. That's a good way to look at it, just for now. I probably didn't scroll down enough when I clicked in that other area by the NAICS code. So you can actually do a search on your NAICS code too. And I actually really recommend that, like, especially if it's something where you're not sure if there's a lot of opportunities out there, like something unique. That's a good way to market research. And some of these are old ones. Let's see, and you'll see there's 5,000 results there. There we go. Okay, I resorted it to come up with something newer. And this actually ended up taking me to all over the place. But so when you get into this, it gets you know, you have to find the opportunities. Here's child and youth outreach program coordinator. So you have to click in here and then look through the information. This one looks like it was already awarded. And it gets, honestly, it gets very complicated when you're looking through here, when you get to that point where we mentioned in the beginning that, you know, now you have the certifications and now you're looking for opportunities, and you end up here and you're scrolling through looking for things, and you really have to spend a lot of time. We were actually talking about doing another class just on this part of here, because we could spend a couple hours just looking through here. So the main thing is just knowing that it takes some time to scroll through here and find some information. Are there any other questions? Let's see. Somebody said they're building low to moderate homes in the hub zone area. Funding is always going to go back to our lending, SBA lending program, so we can put you in contact with somebody in our office that works on that. See, are there any other questions out there that I missed? I see one here. Yeah, selecting a contract. That's kind of where we just went. Can you still hear me okay? Uh-oh.
Yes, we can hear
Oh,
you.
okay. I got a little nervous there.
Yeah.
That's why I always
No, you're
ask, because and again, I know that wasn't much time spent on that because it is very time consuming. And I would tell you that, like, at the place you're at right now, most of your time you want to spend on getting these certifications, and then you know, you can look through here and look through some of the requirements, but you want to spend most of your time getting registered in SAM and getting certified on whichever ones apply to you. You know, the 8A, the hub zone, small disabled veteran, or 8A, woman owned, I should have said. Like right here, this is your starting point for entity registration. Like, where do you start to register your entity? You're going to go to get started here. And then it's kind of what we've been harping on the whole time. First, you're going to request a DUNS number. Then you're going to prepare your data. Then you're going to get a login, and you're going to submit your application. And it kind of tells you right here, it takes 10 minutes to get a DUNS number. So you're going to go through that. So you like right here, I could click on that, and it'll take you to the appropriate website. So it's just a matter of going through one screen at a time until you get to where you want to be. See if there was anything else here. Any other questions?
One last one. It says, does the website explain why the full-time requirement is in place regarding the AA application?
Yeah, it will. And it's basically, the reason for that is because it's a business development program. So we want you focused on your business 100%. And then it will take you to the, like, if you want to email us separately, we'll get you right to the exact part of the website that talks about it, and even the regulation that explains it. And that's where some of those exceptions might be explained a little bit. I think this page right here, and you'll have a link contracting guide. It'll take you into all the contracting programs. I'm not going to go through that because we did scroll through most of them, and I know we're running out of time here. And hopefully this popped up. This is our main web page right here. And I tried to show upcoming events, like you can see the one we're in right now. So, and you'll have a link to this where it'll tell you, you know, go to our calendar to look up for upcoming events, and you can see some of them, and you'll see some of our resource partners there, SCORE. Sometimes you'll see SBDC. And then there's more information here. And it, like this area right here, if you click for email updates, you'll get an email. Usually we send them out once a week, and it'll talk about upcoming classes, and some of you probably already got that. We put you in a database. There's like 30,000 people in it. So anytime there's an upcoming event, you'll get an email. You know, you don't get junk mail, just like one email a week. Here's some of our upcoming events. Like Small Business Week, that was one of them this week. And you'll have a direct link for that. So that's 2 ways to look at upcoming classes in the future. And again, if you know, you still have some lingering questions, especially if it's something really specific, you know, like the 100% dedication to the business, email us and we'll get into more detail on that. But I think the best thing out of today is to look at it like register in SAM, so you're eligible as a small business, because sooner, you know, in any business, you're going to have to compete for contracts. And then look at the preferential contracting programs to see if you fit in one of those. And then you'll get at the point where you have your registration, your certifications, and then you start looking for contracts or opportunities. Even we usually do in-person events, like we haven't done it in 2 years in a row because of COVID, but we normally do like a small business week, like this week is Small Business Week. We usually do an event at the convention center, and we do our annual Small Business Awards. And as part of that, in the morning, we do a contracting matchmaker event. So we bring anyone we could get, all from that does federal contracting, state, local, in one room with about 40 or 50 tables set up, and you get to walk around each one and look for contracting opportunities. In lieu of that, you'll have a list of the points of contact for the small business representatives at each federal agency throughout the state. And this, again, some of the state and local too. So we'll send you that. You get kind of a long email, but it has a lot of good information in there. Any final questions? I know we're about at that time. All right, looks like we're good to go. But thanks everybody for attending, and keep in touch, and you know, reach out to us, to CMA, whoever, you know, they're there too. They're a great resource. You got any? I'll let Anthony close it out. I think you might be muted, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that deep dive that you did into Contracting 101. We definitely learned a lot, and you did an outstanding job. If you would, out in virtual land, please give Michael that virtual applause, that hand clap. You did an outstanding job with that, and in helping our business owners prepare and telling us the next steps, what's needed in order to gain those contracts. Just in closing, just to reiterate once again, the presentation and the webinar will be available on our website, and you will get an email of the presentation as well. On the behalf of our staff here at CMA, we thank you for joining on today, and also for the SBA as well. Please continue to stay safe and stay resilient. Have a great day.